all the class team members. And yeah, Pranali, if I think everyone is around, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah, then we can start the discussion. Eric or Abhishek, you can take it forward.
Sure. Um, so we've been doing some work for a little bit around fixing all of the various scenarios where you can't delete RBD volumes due to dependencies from other volumes or snapshots existing on the RBD backend. So this has kind of been a class of issues that's been around for many years, where since when you do RBD volume clones from volumes or snapshots, there's a copy on write operation on the back end that leaves the volumes kind of linked together. And in a lot of scenarios, you couldn't delete the parent volume when you cloned volumes from it. So we've, between some patches that have already landed and this patch I've linked here, I think we have a solution for all of those issues on the Cinder side, where we are breaking dependencies where needed and also using the RBD trash functionality, which lets you basically delete a volume from, well, it lets you delete an RBD volume from Cinder, and on the RBD backend, it puts the image in a trash namespace where it will hang out until it can be purged later when there are no dependencies on it. So this is looking pretty decent from the Cinder side. What we tried to do a little while ago was turn on the option in the deployment tools, OOO specifically, where we use the new RBD clone v2 image format that enables some of this to work for Cinder. And that caused regressions in Glance where image deletions didn't behave the same. And so we had to back off on that for now. And so the remaining work for all of this, so at the moment we have this Cinder patch, which if we merged this today, we'd be in pretty good shape for Cinder. There are still issues where you can't delete Glance images due to dependencies when you clone a volume from an image, since there's an optimized copy on write on the RBD backend, similar to volume clone done between Cinder and Glance. So we need to now do some changes in Glance, similar to what we've done in Cinder, to handle this and not have image deletions in Glance fail due to Cinder clones of images. So my current plan is to work in Glance Store and enable use of the RBD trash functionality similar to what we do in this Cinder patch, so that Glance image deletion can work and not get blocked by clones of RBD images on the back end. That's probably a lot of detail, but that's the general idea of the idea here. Mute while the sirens are going by. So I don't know what people want to know exactly. I think the plan is that I'm going to go try to code this up in the near future for Glance and see how it looks. I mean, I think I have a pretty good idea of what needs to be done for it. I'm not sure what else we want to discuss today. Does this sound reasonable in general?
Yeah, so basically, are you going to propose a spec also for the glance side of changes? Because we like to know exactly what kind of changes we are going to do and how exactly we are going to do it.
I can if that's part of. I don't do enough work around glance to know what you usually do specs for. I'm probably going to write the code first, so I would know what to put in the spec, but I can work on a spec if needed for sure.
So basically, if you post the POC, then someone from Glance can assist you in building the spec for the same. Otherwise, if you want to start with the spec, then also someone can help us to write the spec as well. And definitely, we also want to know, like, is there any plan to cover it from Tempest side, or you need assist in that as well?
The Tempest tests are clone a Cinder volume from a glance image
Mhm.
and try to repeat the glance image. So it's pretty basic
Yeah.
Cinder glance Tempest stuff. I don't know if that exists now. Presumably it's failing for Ceph or it's turned off. But I think it probably will be covered from. Most of this work has gone in the Cinder Tempest plugin. I don't know for that particular test if it will end up in there as well or where exactly. But yeah, there should be a Tempest test run somewhere to cover this.
Eric, I have a question.
Okay.
I might be missing it. And by the way, if I were a Glance developer, I would absolutely welcome your contribution. And by the way, I work on Keystone right now, of all things, and like so. But the question I have is like, I must have missed it. But why do you have to fix Glance for this? Like, it looks like for Glance to know if a volume is implemented as copy on write or not looks like a leakage of abstraction through layers, like pretty badly. Like, why cannot we hide it inside Cinder?
Because Cinder and Glance are linked together when you're using Ceph between the two of them, because we want to be able to do copy on write clones of Cinder volumes from Glance images, and a lot of people use that. So there is a whole class of operations.
Oh, never
That
mind. Okay, I know. All right, yes. Images
so
are
basically,
not volumes. That's what you're saying, right?
I'm not
So,
sure if either.
so images are stored in Ceph, but they are not volumes as far as Cinder is concerned. That's what's going on here.
Well, Cinder volumes are backed by RBD images, and Glance
Yes.
images are also backed by RBD images.
Yes.
I may be mixing up terminology that sounds similar, but when you
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
a
Okay, I got
Cinder
it now.
one from a Glance image, you basically have two RBD images, and one of them depends on the other one.
Yeah. I got it now. But maybe we wanna like write it down somewhere. You know, I'll try to type it into Etherpad, but if you guys, like I think Rajat is taking notes. So if you see, if you can understand what I write, then it's okay. If you don't, then just delete it.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is helpful, but so this is a different case from when Cinder's being used as a backend for Glance. So this is a case where both of them are using Ceph, and we're letting
Correct.
them mix streams in the background.
Yeah,
Yes.
so all of the work that I'm proposing to do in Glance is going to be in the Ceph driver for Glance store.
I wrote down Pete's concern. If yeah, feel free to add more information. Also, I had a proposal to use the same cow cloning optimization when uploading a volume to image, and I had that POC, but that requires first of all the Keystone service role, and another is the RPD work that is Eric is proposing to do. So if that all this work is done, then I can also continue my work on that. So basically, it's the opposite. When uploading a volume to image, we will create a cow clone on the glance side. And I did some performance testing, and yeah, it's really useful, like from 2 minutes to 2 seconds. So really usable.
Interesting, and I think service role from Keystone should not be blocker because that is just the helper function we are adding in the Keystone. If you want to continue your work, you can manually create the service role and document it as well. So that's it. I think Keystone work is important because we are just creating that role automatically by using bootstrap command. But it is not a blocker if we want to continue the work.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. But yeah, again, I will wait for this to merge, this
Right,
RPD work at least.
right. I think we are clear for this. Eric has a basic idea what exactly he is going to do for Glassdoor. So if he write a POC, then we will write a spec for it and ask Eric to review it for corrections. Otherwise, we can go either way as well. Anything will work for us.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, then.
And Eric, if I understand correctly, the sender side change is good for review, right?
I need to see. It's been quite a while since I looked at that patch. I know I had gone over a couple of comments. I think there may still be one or two things Pete pointed out that I need to address. But I'll cycle back and see if there's anything lingering there. I think Pete pointed out one or two implementation things that looked a little concerning that we need to either patch up or explain.
Okay. Yeah, just update us when it's ready for you and we can move forward the sender side of changes.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, thanks Eric and Abhishek for driving this effort.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric.
Sure, thanks.
And we have a few minutes, and the Nova team will be joining us for another discussion. So till then we have 6 minutes if anyone wants to discuss anything related to Cinder and plants. Probably very less time, but
So basically, I just want to ask a question. You have started restructuring Glance Cinder driver, I can see a couple of patches already got merged. So are you going to continue working on that, or is there any plan for the same, or do you need any help from Glance side as well?
So as of now, I'm not. So I had few things to address there. I will just briefly summarize my work that I did in the last cycle.
Mhm.
So basically, all the driver code, like any protocol, like if it's iSCSI or Fiber Channel or NFS, all the code was combined in a single Cinder store file, which made the code look like it was very unreadable, and there were a lot of things that we had to custom handle. Like if there is an NFS uh, attachment and we have an encrypted volume or a QCOW2 volume, then we need to reject that request. So a lot of custom code was introduced from place to place. So initially what I did was refactor the whole Cinder store into different files. So there is the base file as of now, which contains all the generic code for all the protocols. And then we have one file for NFS and one for Scale IO. For NFS, we don't use OSBrick. We do the custom handling as Nova does it, like mounting and unmounting. We do it in a custom way on the Glance store side. And yeah, that was pretty much the refactoring change. And then I had this feature where I was going to support the extend in use functionality. So previously in the Glance Cinder store, we only used to write 1 GB of data at a time. So if there is a 4 GB image that we need to write into a volume, then we used to do after 1 GB we used to detach the volume, extend it to 1 GB, then attach it again, and then write the 1 GB more of image again. So it was like 4 times we have to perform this detach, extend, and attach. So what I did, so Cinder supports this functionality. We can extend an attached volume if the driver supports it. And as I looked in the support metrics, most of the drivers supported as of now. Maybe not NFS, but yeah, most of the drivers do it. So I implemented that functionality with a config option. So if you enable that config option, it just calls the Cinder extend API for the attached volumes. And we don't have to do this whole procedure of detaching and attaching again and again. So it's just a single extend call. So if we look at it from API perspective, the detach call has a call to OSBrick, then it has a call to attachment delete API. And in the attachment create, we have while attaching, we have attachment create, attachment update, and the OSBrick call. So a lot of API and OSBrick calls we are avoiding with this functionality. So I didn't do performance testing on it, but I assume like performance would be significantly better with that. So that was all the efforts I had for Glance Cinder store as of now, and I will look for more cases if I test around. But yeah, right now I'm not planning to do anything, and also I've taken a lot of commitments on the Cinder side. So yeah, we need to focus on that. But yeah, that's pretty much the summary of all the updates that I did in the last few cycles.
Thank you for updating, and let us know if you find something is important and you need help from grant side. So let us know. We will try to help you there, as you have lots of work in your hand. Let us know if something is urgent. We can address it for you.
Sure, that would be great. Yeah, thanks for
Thank
that.
you.
I will let you know if I have anything. And we are almost there, so I will just ping Silvan for joining us. I mean, they will remember, but yeah, just.
He's aware, but he'll be joining soon. The Nova room basically just went on a break before now, so they'll be coming back at the top of the hour.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thanks, Sean.
Yeah,
I will
of
still,
course. I'm just arriving.
okay. I will just put the link in the Nova channel. So
Yeah,
it's,
basically, do we want to use the Nova Etherpad or maybe the Glance Etherpad? I mean, correct me. It's for direct URL discussion, right?
yeah, I can switch it apart.
Yeah,
So
cool.
okay, I will switch to Nova Etherpad then. Oh,
As you want. I mean, I don't have any problems by that. Let me see if some people wrote some comments or some stuff. For Glance. Yeah.
I use the same content as in Glance. Like, yeah, a few hours ago, I just pasted the same thing. So, but
Yeah, okay. So yeah, maybe that's your screen, right? Maybe then just see just show the Nova Etherpad, and then we could be discussing here then if you want.
okay.
I think we have more. I think we actually I can copy paste. Is it the Cinder Etherpad, right?
Yeah,
Just
this is the
verifying.
Cinder one.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I can copy paste the three links that you have, because I don't see them in the Nova Etherpad. I will do that. And then I guess we can start. I don't know many Nova folks who are having. Okay, I think we probably can start.
Okay, so yeah, let's start. Uh, am I audible now? I hope I am.
Yeah, you are.
Okay, okay. So, yeah, in this station, we are going to discuss the state of the work to support the secure mechanism for exposing and managing multiple image locations in Glance, and what Cinder and Nova side changes would require for the same. So during last PTG, we decided to fix the glance issue by going with the solution proposed by Rajat to remove the show multiple locations config option, and to have two new location APIs, which will replace the image update mechanism in Glance for consumers like Cinder and Nova. So in Antelope cycle, we had the spec for the new locations API in Glance, but we couldn't implement this since Antelope was a short cycle and most of the team members were on year-end leaves and some other leaves. And we also thought that we have dependency on Keystone for a service role, for which the patch is already up for review since last cycle, but not yet merged. But like Abhishek said, Keystone patch is not a dependency. It is just to create the role automatically for us, and we can create it manually as well. So now in this cycle, we will have the glance side fixed by setting up the dependency on Keystone patch. So first, we will have to move the glance spec to 2023.2, which we have merged in Antelope cycle, uh, since we are going to implement this in the upcoming cycle. And then we can submit the fix hopefully before milestone 2, so including the client side changes as well. And for Cinder and Nova side changes, I think Rajat is going to work on, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, they will be pretty much minimal because Nova and Cinder are just consumers of the new APIs. So there will be two new
Yeah.
APIs on the Glance side, and we just need to add code to query it, so it won't be too much work. And since I wrote the spec, already have some idea, so it won't be that hard. But yeah, I will be able to do it.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, I think Nova is requesting the spec for the same. So who is going to write
Well,
that?
yeah, so we're requesting a spec because we don't necessarily think it's going to be just trivial to make sure that every place that depends on the old behavior gets updated cleanly. Um, in theory, it's simple. We just need to make sure we're calling the new APIs. However, we need to also make sure we have the fallback to the old APIs as well, because we need to support people upgrading for this and having old Glance and new Nova. But also the other way around, we need to make sure that we support in either direction. So in principle, it's simple. The other thing that's relevant here is we have low-hanging fruit bugs / RFEs to try and move to using the SDK for interacting with other services. So I would prefer to consume these new APIs from the SDK rather than Glance client if we were to start calling them. So I would hope that adding support to the SDK is part of the current Glance planned work.
Yeah. Basically, we are also working on bridging the gap between Glance client and SDK. So definitely we will also keep in mind like adding this new support in the SDK as well. So if that is not mentioned in the spec, then while moving the spec to current cycle, we will include it the spec as well.
So I have one question on the service role. I'm assuming that the new policy that's going to be used on the Glance side is going to be admin or service, so that eventually we can get rid of the use of the admin credentials for this. Is that the intent, or is it going to be service role only? Because that obviously has an upgrade impact for operators. They just need to make sure that the user that they have in the Nova config for interacting with Glance has the appropriate roles, so either the admin role or the service user role. But if we support both initially, that allows them time to transition from one to the other.
So based on the current spec, so we have two APIs. One is for creating the location. So for that, we are using the owner. So if anybody, so always the first location will be registered by the owner. So we have kept the policy to that. And for the get policy, we are keeping it to service only as of now. In the spec, at least we have mentioned for service only, because yeah, I think there were some concerns regarding using admin privileges for that. I'm not sure how much Nova uses the get location API in places.
We use it to determine whether or not we can do a copy and write clone on backends that support that, such as RBD. We also use it for, we've now got support for Glance multi-store. So when we are going from one cell to another, if one is using a different store, we can do a Glance image import from one store to the other, and then do the copy and write clone from that as well to stop duplicating Ceph images. So all of that would have to be tested in CI and working as well. So that's why we're just a little bit concerned with making sure that all of the locations that use this are updated properly to be able to use the new APIs when they exist and fall back to the old ones when they don't.
I also have a question about upgrades. Say because with Nova you can basically upgrade only a few computes. Just to be clear, those APIs they are like new, but if I remember correctly, you can either use the older API or the new API, and this works, right? You will only deprecate that, or will you remove the older API while you create the new one?
So this effort is going to be in different phases. So first we are planning to implement the new APIs. Then we will be adding support on the consumer side to use the new API. So this can be a multi-cycle effort as well. not particularly to be done all at once. And finally, we are going to, so the config option that allows accessing this URL is deprecated already. So maybe we can remove it or we can keep it. But yeah, first the glance work, then we will modify the consumers to access the
Okay,
new API.
I'm saying that because it's a slop release for the moment. So that means that, for example, operators don't really know about it. If they want to upgrade from Antelope to C, they could be doing that. So basically, if you want to create a new API by now, you also need to make sure that basically you continue to help them on C, and you shouldn't be like deprecating anything on C or removing anything on C because you created that on Bobcat. That's just my
Yeah, so you can deprecate it on C. It's just that the config option and the values that are returned in the API will have to remain till D, so that they can actually, because in the Antelope cycle, they won't have support in Nova or the other projects for this new API. And we have to support people going directly from A to D without
C.
modifying their configs. Yeah.
Yeah. And as a reminder, that will also mean that you can have C computes, but also Antelope computes, and we'll support that. Keep that in mind.
Which means that for things like code migrations and, well, I don't know if it actually affects code migrations, but it would affect just booting new VMs. We need to actually have the ability to have some of the VMs spawning using the new image location stuff and some of them spawning using the old way of looking it up in the same deployment for a protracted period of time.
The fact is that, if we do that by the SDK, I'm okay. I just want to make sure that we have a specific method. What I'm saying is that if you say that's fine, we have like 2 APIs and basically the client will support both of the APIs, cool enough, but then basically it's an important client modification. And it's not like an SDK. It's not just like an SDK call for like getting the API. It's like a support from the client. So if we are saying let's do this in the SDK, but also because you want, I guess, to do it as well for the Glance client, then basically you will need to have both methods. If that's not just a call to an API.
The SDK has 2 levels. Well, actually it's 3, but it's got 2 levels of how it exposes services. It has a low-level representation of all of the REST APIs, and then it has a higher-level representation of what they model abstractly. What I was originally assuming is in the Nova side, we would use the lower-level thing to do a request with the new API, and if it was supported, and if we didn't get back the location, we would then try again with the old location, by giving precedence to the new APIs. But you could, the SDK, because it has those 2 levels, you could actually put in a higher level one that will do that internally, so that Nova just has one call to make to the SDK, and we just leave the SDK, give us a location if it exists, and have it do that internally.
It's an option that's probably what we should be discussing on the Nova spec, to be clear. I just want to make sure that either you say, don't be afraid, we'll like support that by the client, cool enough, but then you basically need to do that on 2 clients, which will be like a problem. Or you say no, basically the client, we won't like have some specific support by the client because, for example, because people directly call our APIs and we don't want them to use specific clients, and that I will definitely understand that. If so, then explain that basically all the customers of your APIs need to basically support both calls.
Yeah, so from what I understand is Nova is mainly concerned about the backward compatibility and even the slurp and non-read slurp releases. So we are not too hard on removing the old functionality. The point is just like if we keep the old functionality for long enough, people would never move to the new one. But yeah, we can do it at a later phase. The main idea of the feature is to just implement the new APIs in Glance and make Nova and Cinder start using it. And as you mentioned, few of the points, like I think we can implement the same behavior on the Cinder side as well to be consistent and as to be backward compatible.
I mean, it's just an upgrade question, because I'm okay with like modifying the Nova services to call the new API. I'm just saying that we also need, because we won't be able to modify the older services. Basically, they will continue to run, and they won't know about the API, so they will continue to ask for the older APIs. If you just keep that in mind. Also, I think most of the operators upgrade Glance before Nova. That's my guess. That's what I hope. But also, I mean, we could imagine some way that people will test some stuff, and then they will say, okay, that's fine. I will just verify Glance, and then I won't upgrade Glance before some compute. Cool enough. But then in that case, just make sure that for that specific release, slop release, then you can continue to support the. I mean, that's just an upgrade question, I would say. But maybe you should be seeing that in the spec and not by now, I guess.
A lot of this will hopefully be covered by the grenade job anyway. We have the skip level upgrade job, so that will hopefully catch some of these interactions.
Are we actually? I mean, when you said that we, you said
the way that works
we
is we deploy an all-in-one compute, which also acts as a controller plus a dedicated compute, and we upgrade the controller to 2 levels, so that we have a 2-level old compute. But we also have the normal grenade one, which will test a 1-level old compute.
Sorry, that wasn't my question. Do we have Tempest tests testing the Glance APIs that we use? Because you said about the get image. You can have the get image for RBD reasons, and for the other ones that I can remember, do we test that with Tempest?
So the Tempest test can't guarantee that the copy of my clone works, but I believe we have a Nova config option that will prevent RBD downloads, and I believe that is running in a job, but I don't know if that's in the Glance jobs or the Nova jobs. There's a config option that basically says, Nova, you shall not download this image and duplicate the data. And I think that's in one of our CIs. I would have to check which one, but I know that Dan Smith worked on that at some point.
Okay, I'm saying that because at least my main concern is about the grenade job and what it tests, not about the other jobs. But if we say that's fine, we can use grenade just to make sure that basically grenades test that. That's just my point. Okay, cool enough.
From a Cinder perspective, we use the Glance location for 2 purposes. Like when Glance is using Cinder as a backend and Glance is using RBD as a backend, then we do some optimizations on the Cinder side while creating a bootable volume from image. So those 2 cases I have in mind, but
there's also another one, which is when you're doing snapshots, you can make sure that the snapshot data is updated directly in the backend without having to go through Glance, correct? Volume snapshots.
So are you talking about when Glance is using Cinder as a backend or RPD as a backend in that particular case, or?
I believe there's an interaction when you configure Glance, use Cinder as a backend, and you create a volume snapshot from that. There's something that Cinder is looking at to know that it doesn't actually need to duplicate the data. Or I have it configured on my home cloud, but I can't remember the exact name for the feature.
So in this currently, what we do, the operation we perform, like while creating the Glance image, if it is Cinder back, then we create a volume in the service project, like internal. And when we create a volume from that image, then we just clone the volume, the internal volume. So any snapshot we create of the new volume we had, the bootable volume, it goes in the same, like we don't have to interact with glance in that case. And we don't touch the image backed volume.
Yeah, so the thing is, if you create a boot from volume guest from that image, it does a thin snapshot over it for the volume that's created. So for example, I'm using LVM as my storage. It's doing a tin provision volume that's using the glance image as its backing volume. So just making sure that still works. So when it's boot from volume from Cinder backed glance image, basically. But I think that's also tested in CI somewhere.
Yeah, I have a CI running on the glance gate for multi-backend configuration LVM, which runs Tempest integrated storage of like test included in those jobs. So that's pretty much is working fine. I'm hopeful that boot from volume is, yeah, I think it is tested there. So I had a question from glance side. So maybe it's more of an implementation detail, but do we have a way to know which feature is supported in glance? Like in Cinder and Nova, we have micro versions to know. So can we know from the API query, like if this particular feature with this version is supported or not? I'm hoping glance team hasn't left us and still there.
Sorry, I didn't hear the last sentence you said.
Yep. Sorry, I will just repeat. So is there any way, like if I want to query glance, like this particular feature is supported or not? Is it associated with a particular version which I can query with the glance API that this feature is supported or not? Can I do it from Cinder or Nova?
No, I don't think so. But when we add a new API, we just increase overall API version from glance. So I think there is a versions API which will return you the current version, and you can see if that version is not where this new API is introduced matches, then you can see that this API is not supported. You can say something like
Yes,
that.
so Stephen Finucane actually wrote a blog on this not that long ago. Glance and Keystone both use micro versions in a different way than we do in Cinder and Nova. So instead of having a version bump per API change, they do a version bump per release. So if there's an API change in a release, then they bump the overall global one. But if there's two API changes in that release, they don't bump it the second time. So we can set a min API version check to know that it's the Bobcat release. We guess can't tell that you're somewhere in between the Bobcat release, but if we know that Bobcat supports this feature, then we can do that check.
Okay, yeah, that might be helpful because otherwise we will have to try the first location call, the new one, and if it fails, then we have to try the old one, which is again like, so yeah, this might be helpful and yeah, make the effort a little bit easier. So I think the current work item is needs to be done on the glance side to implement the new APIs. So do we have a volunteer for the same from glance team?
Well, yeah, we will have to discuss it with the team as we are short in size, so we are not yet sure, but we'll try to discuss it and let you know.
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
One thing is sure, like definitely we want to work on this on priority because we want rid of certain things like due to the CB, we also need to deploy two glance services. One is user facing and one is internal. So if we implement this, this will also help us to reduce split deployment for glance as well. So this should be a priority work for us in this cycle.
Yes, so one thing to be careful with when you're doing that split deployment is you should be using the admin endpoint, not the internal endpoint, to model that one that's used for service-to-service interaction. And you need to make sure you're firewalling it because the tenants must not be able to get to that, or you still are vulnerable. The reason you don't want to use the internal endpoint in Keystone is overloaded. It has two uses. One is for service-to-service interaction. The other usage is it's used in some public clouds for unmetered, i.e. unbilled, access to the APIs. So if you use a public endpoint, because that's going out of the cloud and back in usually, even if they hairpin it in the routers, that's still usually counted towards the billed traffic that your VMs have. On a lot of public clouds, they don't bill for the VM to VM communication that happens on the internal API. So if you're uploading images or downloading them or whatever you happen to be doing by the APIs that are data intensive, it's common in public clouds to use the internal Keystone endpoint to not have to pay for those calls. So while that isn't a hard and fast rule, just be aware that that's an expectation a lot of people have, which is why using the admin endpoint for this thing that should only be talked to by services is a better choice than using internal. I raised this with the Keystone team on the Etherpad, and I was asking, can we add a service endpoint so we can stop this overloading of what the different endpoints mean? But I wasn't able to attend the session to advocate for this. But just keep in mind, if you're deploying this in production and you haven't isolated whatever other endpoint you're using for the second glance thing at the firewall level, just having two of them won't actually protect you. You need to make sure it's locked down.
Yep, thank you. We will keep that in mind. So action items like I think should be glance work, and then submit spec for Nova and Cinder side work for this cycle.
Yeah, that sounds good. I can repropose the glance spec. I think there are some changes. Maybe Sean mentioned that we should use the admin credentials as well in the get to have the time for migrating from the old compatibility to the new one. So Sean, if I understand correctly, that's what you wanted, right?
The reason I was suggesting that is the Antelope computes won't know necessarily that the service role is a thing, but you could configure them with an admin role. I don't think we have the admin credentials for Glance at the moment in the NovaConf, though. I'm not 100% sure about that. So it's just something to consider, that maybe the default policy should be admin or service. That's what we're using as the traditional or the transitional policy for placements APIs. It's not
yeah,
bad,
but
though.
Yeah, I mean, that being said, Antelope services won't know anything about the new API, so that they won't call it either way. But yeah, I mean, in general, we continue to support the legacy credentials for, I would say, simple reasons. Because at least you can configure, correct me if I'm wrong, but actually you can configure your environment. Even if we default to use the new policies, you can continue to use the legacy ones. We haven't removed that yet. So yeah, if we can continue at least to have the legacy policies, would be simple. Would be preferred.
With that said, assuming the service role, so one of the cross project goals for this cycle is to complete the adoption of the service role in all projects. So if we assume that we can rely on that, maybe we don't actually need to run the MNO service. I think we can kind of leave that up to your review. It's just that it may or may not help with upgrades. I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, I'm not very familiar with the configuration about the policies, but my only concern is that if we require some kind of compute configuration in order to support that service policy,
the only thing that's required is the user that is specified in Nova config must have that role assigned to it in Keystone.
Okay, that's not a configurable option that people need to upgrade if they want to upgrade.
No, so that would have been the case if we were talking about the token scopes, so like the system scopes tokens, so that required you to change the config options, but just having role on it does not.
Okay, that was my wrong assumption then. Okay, cool. Then I mean, just to be clear, my only concern is that if operator needs to upgrade needs to modify their config before they upgrade, that would be a problem. But yeah. So basically, I added a note which was we should also discuss in a spec about any config modification need for upgrades. But basically, that's that's nay. There is no kind of config modification that is required for an upgrade, from what I hear.
Well, there's a post-upgrade action, right? So as an operator, once you have upgraded all of the services to ones that support the new API, if you are using the old config option to enable it, you need to set that to false for security, at which point you can stop deploying the second glance instance, etc. So like there should just be some documentation of once you finish the upgrade and you have the new secure by default configuration, these are the additional steps to do afterwards.
Yeah, but that's okay. Sorry, I was speaking of the Nova side point of view. No, okay. For the glance side, yeah, indeed. If any customer no longer like use the older APIs, then yeah, indeed you can just modify the configuration to say, hey, meh. Cool. So do we want to just because so I think that Rajat is no longer there, right? So basically my point is that I guess we have an owner. Do we want to discuss the Nova spec on the same cycle? I guess so. My only concern is that if we want to create that new Glance API, we need to make sure that, of course, we can do that at some milestone point of view. So basically, after a period of time, then we can merge the Nova call. My only concern is that, yeah, if it's that close, like very close to milestone 3, I would be afraid of merging anything in the Nova side, but yeah. I mean, this is just Glance, right? Nobody uses Glance, right? No, sorry, just kidding. But yeah, I mean, cool, Rajat. So yeah, so basically TLDR, if we are about doing that on Bobcat, then please, if we want to merge anything in Nova, please don't ask to merge it by the last weeks before milestone 3. That's my only concern.
Okay. Sounds good. I think Rajat has some power issues, so he will not be hearing us. I will discuss it with him because is going to propose a spec for Glance side, Nova side as well. So definitely we will discuss all the points before finalizing all the things.
Okay, shall we move
Moving on?
to the Cinder
Yeah.
session? Yeah.
Okay, thank you for having us. Have a good PTG ahead. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. So I request Glance team to join the Glance room.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
So Rajat has a problem, so I guess who can run? I mean, that's a Nova Cinder meeting, so I mean, I can share my screen. I'm okay with that. Who wants to answer for the first topic that we have, while Rajat is trying to join again? NFS encryption. Eric, I think Eric is there. Yeah, and oh,
Hey,
I
how's it
mean, go
going?
for it. Yeah.
Do you mind sharing the etherpad?
Yeah, I'm like trying to share my screen. Give me a second. It was like a way before. It was like a way of time that I was using BlueJeans, so I need to remember how to share my screen. Yeah,
I
share
can do it
screen.
if
I
you
mean,
want. Okay.
no, that's I actually please do, because I'm using the BlueJeans app and it looks to me that if I'm trying to share my screen, you will only see like a black screen.
I'm back if I
Oh,
missed
okay.
anything.
Thanks, Roger.
If you're
So
back, we
Rajat,
can leave you share again.
Oh, okay. I
Thank you, Rajat.
think that's correct. Okay.
yeah, I mean, Sophia, if you want to start to discuss, maybe.
Okay. So, Cinder is working on supporting encryption on NFS volumes. To do this, well, this is a brief summary. Sorry. To do this, NFS driver use looks inside QCOW. And this affects Nova because Nova cannot handle looks inside QCOW disk format at the moment and tries to format these volumes in plain looks. So I propose the first patch to handle this scenario. The base patch implements a new function to check if the volume looks inside QCOW. And if that's true, just avoid formatting to plain looks. So for now, there are only 2 patches, and I would like to know what Nova thinks of it and if it makes sense, and if I really need blueprint for this or what are the options here.
So a blueprint, yes, but that doesn't mean you need a spec, right? We just need something to track this against. Looking at the 2 patches you have, I think it's small enough that we could do this without a spec. So if others agree with that, then we can. The next step on the Nova side would be to propose this, or create the blueprint, and then we can triage it in the next Nova team meeting and either give the spec approval or not. Also, the spec blueprint approval or not. My main question actually is this the extent of what's needed? Right, because that would color the question of does this need a spec or something else. If it's only these two patches, they seem pretty small. I guess we need to understand, is this tested in Tempest, etc. as well? But I don't necessarily think that needs a spec to have that discussion either. So is this the extent of what will be needed, or do you expect there to be more patches?
For now, are only those patches. I had some Tempest on Cinder side to show some results.
So just to clarify, there is a round call against. I mean, I'm trying to look at is Lux inside Qcode2 patch, and basically you look up the image to discover whether it supports Lux, right?
Yes.
So that's adding an HTTP round trip. That's basically it.
Sorry, say again.
Sorry. I mean, I don't want to discuss the technical details of search implementation. I'm just trying to understand the workflow. The workflow is basically.
It's not HTTP lookup. It's actually after the image has been created by the NFS driver on the Cinder side, Nova is using QEMU image to inspect the image on the share to see if it's got looks. So that doesn't add any REST overhead. It's just looking at the NFS share.
Okay, so yeah, I didn't really look at what images with an S library was doing. That's my bad, but okay, cool enough. That's okay. That's basically just like a check within the image using some Q. Okay, cool. Actually that looks very. I mean that's actually very, very small. So yeah, basically what Sean said. I mean, just describe the workflow in some Launchpad blueprint. Do you feel familiar with our process, or do you want me to explain what's a specless blueprint?
Yes, please, because I know how to do in Cinder, but maybe it's kind of different.
Yeah, no worries, because every project has its own like paperwork. I mean, no worries. Very quickly explaining. So basically, you just create a blueprint in Launchpad against the Nova project. When you create that blueprint, add in the description exactly what you want to explain about, let's say, the workload, and what you want to modify, just like a paragraph, and then add it to the weekly meeting agenda that we have for Nova every Tuesdays. If you want, we can discuss that on IRC. I will ping you those links. And then on the next Tuesday, then we'll discuss within our meeting whether we agree on the fact that the description is quite small and clear, and the fact that it doesn't really need to discuss about, for example, upgrade issues or API modifications or DB upgrades, for example. That's kind of a simple implementation modification. And if we say yes, then basically we accept your blueprint, and basically you're accepted. And then we can review the changes that you already have, actually. And then if we're okay with the implementation changes, and you're basically done.
Okay. Makes sense. Okay, I follow those steps then when I create the blueprint.
Are you in the Nova channel or in the Cinder channel? Just because I can just ping you some links.
I'm on the Cinder channel.
Okay, cool. Then I will join the Cinder channel if I'm not. and then I will ping you a few details for our process. I
That's
mean,
great.
the only thing you need is basically to attend the next Nova meeting after you added it in the agenda. That's if you can do it for next Tuesday, fair enough, because I mean it's quite close to the PTG. If you prefer to do it on the other next meeting, fair enough. I will explain that in IRC.
So
Okay.
there is one thing that's in the back of my mind, which hasn't been addressed by your current patches. So looking at your current patches, they're just in the libvirt driver. They're not touching any objects, database models, or APIs, which is great. However, it would impact move operations. So because we support rolling upgrade, you could have one version of Nova that doesn't have support for the encrypted volumes and potentially another one that does. So the one thing we might want to add is having the libvirt report a trait to say that this compute is capable of this thing, and then having a tiny prefilter which will just look at the Cinder volume and whether it's NFS and whether it's encrypted, and when it's scheduling, just make sure we request that trait. I still think that's small enough that it shouldn't require a spec. But that's just one additional patch that will probably be required at the end of your series, just to make sure that we always move to a host that's actually capable of doing this. I don't think that's going to be that much of a problem, because like it's just the initial scheduling where that hopefully matters, because once the image is formatted once, Nova shouldn't be trying to like reformat it as looks or whatever, but it would cause an issue if we tried to co-migrate to a version of libvirt that didn't support this looks parameter, etc. So we can discuss that in our meeting. But that's the only thing that's in the back of my mind, saying we might be a little bit careful here for the upgrade bit, but it's also something I think is going to be really easy to address. So I don't think it's going to be controversial to move forward. We'll just need to make sure that's documented in the blueprint and that there's a patch that covers that before we merge the final feature.
Yeah. I mean, Sophia, have you understood exactly the upgrade concern?
So I will write a WIP blueprint, and probably I will get back to you on the REC first. But further, I understood this will affect also rolling upgrades.
Correct.
Okay.
The fact that basically you can create an instance on a new compute, which will be a Bobcat compute, and after a period of time, the operator could move that instance to another compute if the scheduler doesn't verify that, then basically it will be going to, for example, an interrupt compute. That would also be, in the case of C, of the C release, a C compute could go to an interrupt compute as well, because we support rolling upgrades for two releases with Slurp. So basically, if we do it, then if it's encrypted, then after moving, you could have an error because this is encrypted, and basically the antelope service doesn't know what to do with the encrypted volume.
Yeah, but so there's two failure modes. If you live migrate it, then it will appear to work because we'll generate the XML on the upgraded node and pass it to the non-upgraded node. But then when you hard reboot it, the VM will not be able to decrypt this disk. And if you do a cold migrate, the XML will be generated on the destination, but it won't actually be able to start again because it won't be able to read the encrypted disk properly, right? So that's why we need to just have the trait to say this compute supports this feature, and make sure that the scheduler will look at what volumes are associated with the instance and ensure that we select a host that has it. But we've done this for a lot of features in the past. It's not a particularly hard thing to do from a Nova side. So that's why I don't think it's controversial to just say we have a trait to say this is supported, and we make sure that that trait is requested when it's required.
Okay. Okay, I need to see it, and I will try to add it on the blueprint because I haven't saw in that. So
Cool.
I
I will just ping you while we discuss on the next topic.
okay, that makes complete sense. Okay, it's good that I don't need an spec to blueprint. None.
I was just thinking, how we'll test this, like with NFS, an NFS job. I was just looking through. I don't think we have like a Nova one, but
Actually,
just
that's a
thinking
very good
about
point.
that.
Yeah. Excellent point, yeah.
Well,
I
Cinder
believe we
has.
still have. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I believe we still have a DevSec NFS plugin, but we don't have a job that uses the NFS plugin at the moment. So yeah, if this could be tested on the Cinder side, that's probably even enough. Or we could maybe use the Cinder job and run that job on the Nova pipeline as well.
We have currently a job for NFS using the NFS DevStack NFS plugin. Currently it does not run encryption on it. I propose a patch to enable it, and that job performs attaching encrypted NFS to Nova. So I can show that. That's okay.
Yeah. Actually, what Melanie was asking is that should we have like a specific Nova job testing it? Actually, that's a good question. I don't know.
We have two options. We could add something to check, but we could also just run the Cinder one in the periodic weekly pipeline as well if we're concerned about resource usage. Because we are reviewing the periodic jobs in our team meetings, so we should see it fail. But Melanie, you were going to say something.
Oh, just that I wasn't thinking it had to be necessarily a Nova job, just, having the encryption enabled running somewhere. Make sure that this continues to work.
I'm
Yeah,
sure
so
Cinder will
basically,
tell us if it breaks.
yeah, that's that. Then that's already done as far as I understand. Okay, then
Cool.
basically, I mean, if we, I guess we just want to make sure that okay, then I think that should be okay. Then we don't need to have a specific Nova job, I guess. So Sophia, I think we are done with your topic. Do you have any other questions for us or for the Cinder team?
I don't have a question. I will try to propose a spec, so maybe get some input before fully proposing before next week or the week after. That's okay.
When you say a spec, you mean the blueprint, right?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no
Still
worries.
saying a spec, but it's
Yeah, I mean, we're on a Thursday. We're on a Thursday. My day is not yet done, and tomorrow we'll have a lot of other topics to discuss. If I can look at your blueprint, and I mean, if Sean and I can look at your blueprint, surely we can. Probably on Monday as well. I'm saying that because I mean, next week is our next meeting will be next Tuesday, so that's pretty close in time. But if you are if you feel that you are able to write the description very quickly, sure. I mean, if we can, let's do it.
okay. I don't know, Eric, do you have any concerns that I'm missing? But I think I cover.
No, I don't think so. Sounds good to me.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay, I'll do that. It's good. Thank you. Thank you for reviewing, Sean and Melanie.
Cool. So the last topic is mine. I'm hoping this can be kind of short. Basically, right now, if you're attaching a Cinder volume to a instance, we look at the image properties on the root disk, and we take the value for the disk bus and reuse it for all volumes. This is a little bit odd because technically in the Nova block device mappings, which you can only use when you're first creating an instance, you can technically set a different disk bus on each of the things in the mappings, and it doesn't work, and it has never, well, it has almost never worked in the past. You can get very lucky. So if you are using, say, SATA or something that has a controller for your root disk, and then you decide to use Virtual Block for the extra thing, because that's just a PCI device that has no dependency on a controller existing, it actually kind of works, and you get into this weird mixed topology. So the question kind of is, do we want to support this intentionally? So that per volume, you could say this one should go on Virtual SCSI, that one should go on Virtual Block. And part of the reason for this is there's some proposals to look at using generic VDPA. So using VDPA, but instead of just doing a NIC offload, you would leverage the fact that some VDPA devices can also do iSCSI or InfiniBand or AudioMA Virtual Block offload in hardware. So one way to enable that would be to label the volume in some way to say that instead of presenting this as a Virtual Block device or a Virtual SCSI device, you would mark it as a VDPA device so that you can leverage those offloads. And the way I was suggesting you would do that is to reuse the existing image properties, but just first support them for all volumes, so you can say do that, and then extend the list to just add VDPA as one of the disk bus options, so that you can actually attach it as a VDPA device. Thoughts?
Yeah, one thing I believe I see a potential problem there. As a user, I may want to create an empty volume and also set this field. And if I'm not mistaken, the image properties is not something a normal user can change. I don't even think that an admin can change it in Cinder.
So I wasn't actually suggesting reusing the image property field that's on the volume right now. I was basically asking, is there something else on the volume we could use to store this, or add a new field for this, or something along those lines? But yeah.
I think since this is something that a user may want to actually change, I would be inclined to think that we would want it to have as metadata, normal metadata, which is something any user can change. Then it comes the question to the Nova team, is there anything a user could mess up in a Nova node if they start putting weird buses in there, or if they can create a conflict that is troublesome for Nova?
So image metadata properties by default in Glance are user settable. So anyone can upload an image and set their own things. So they could do that today, basically. If we were to support this as a feature in Nova, and like this is still a discussion we need to have on the Nova side, is do we actually want to support this? But we would need to cater for which combinations can be enabled at the same time and actually add support for them. So we would have to do some set of validation. For the current image properties, they are also basically defined as an enum. So it's not an arbitrary text field for the value. It has to be one of the predefined set that is supported. So I don't think they could break us, but the metadata at the moment, is that key value, or is it just an opaque string?
For Cinder, the metadata is anything the user wants. It's key value. Any string they want, they can write there. So that is why from Glance, when we create a volume from Glance, we could just copy that properties to the normal field, or Nova could check both fields any way we decide. But I'm worried about the Cinder part because it's, the users can write anything they want. for that particular field.
Yeah, so I think we would use the same validation we have for the image properties if we were to support this on the volume by the metadata. So on the Nova side, we would validate that one, the key is one that we know, and only look at the keys that we care about, so not just anything in the metadata, and two, that it is one of the allowed values. And I guess the implications of that would be if this is a volume attachment, we would reject the attachment on the Nova side before actually trying to do the attach because we say this is not a bus we know. But it would also allow us to check if the particular hypervisor that the VM is currently on actually supports that as well, right? Because some buses are only supported on VMware, some are only supported on, the Vert or that kind of thing.
My concern now is on the Cinder side for the Cinder team, because up to now, the standard metadata that we have is user-facing and kind of there is no validation. So I don't know if it could be, if the Cinder team would be okay with just having a specific key when it's set to add validation or not. I'm okay with it, but just wondering.
So I have one case in mind. So as Sean pointed out, that they can use this information to reject an attachment. So if a user can set a wrong metadata, like any value, any random value to this field as a metadata, that would avoid attaching that volume. Is that really a concern from user end, or it's just end user fault that they are setting this value as
So, Son, would Nova fail to the caller, or would be in the background as an asynchronous operation, the failure of an attach?
Yeah, so I think this would have to be something we did in our API validation before we return the asynchronous, 2 or 1 or whatever we normally return. So I think it would be a synchronous error to the user that there was an attachment failure, and here's why. If we're going to do this, we will have a Nova spec for this anyway. But basically, I'm trying to validate some of the feedback I gave on the spec for generic VDPA. And what I was suggesting is for generic VDPA, it would be better if we could reuse the existing image properties we have rather than creating arbitrary additional metadata that has a specific purpose, because this is a generic thing that I think would be useful. I.e. the ability to say the bus per volume rather than having it be global.
Yeah, so going back to the previous thing, which is what we were talking about validation, it seems like if Nova is going to validate, it doesn't matter if a user writes garbage. So we wouldn't need validation on the Cinder side because the user experience would still be good enough, because they could get a synchronous message saying, nope, it's wrong. They can go and fix it in Cinder. Now, to the next point of using the image properties, I find it weird if Cinder were to set image properties for this when it's not coming from an image.
Sorry, no, I should be more precise. When I say using the image properties, I mean reusing the same set of keys and values that we use for the image properties, so that it's the same metadata, basically.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Actually, I find it even better because from a user experience, now this would make sense. Okay, if I set it in the image, it works. If I set it in the volume, it works. So good user experience. Yeah.
And it's the same relationship we have with Neutron. So Neutron, we have the concept of pneumo-aware ports. So we allow you to set the affinity policy as a flavor access spec, as an image, or on the port. And there's a precedence relationship there. So if we were to do the same thing here, the precedence relationship is if you set it on the root image, that's the default, as it is today. And if you set it on a volume, then that takes precedence over what's on the image, because you may want to go with Vautier SCSI by default, but for this one thing, you want it to be Vautier block.
Sounds good to me. Another rest to me.
Okay, so if we're going to
best part
this,
for Cinder,
we can,
the best part for Cinder, nothing to do here for us.
Yes.
Just write a bit of documentation. That's it.
Yeah, so how I perceive this working is if we're going to go down this road, we'll have a Nova spec that covers the details of the interactors in Nova. We will potentially ask Cinder to review that spec once it's more or less ready. And then one of the things I would like to see done is the Glance metadefs API. You can already say what metadata is available, so I'd also like to have these keys set as metadata that you can have in the volume. And if you do that, that means it's automatically populated into the Horizon user interface for the allowed metadata there. So, you know, it's a nice end-to-end user interaction that we can do, but it doesn't actually require any new APIs. It's just we're using what's already there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I'm not going to be personally working on this myself this cycle, but I'm hoping that if we do proceed with the VDPA stuff, that this is effectively HWDIS bus VDPA is what the user would do, so that we can request that you actually get that storage offload. Cool. So if there's no other comments or questions, I think we can kind of wrap it there.
So from Cinder side, I think we keep the separation of metadata and volume image metadata. So if Nova wants to query this information, they can query the metadata field differently and volume image metadata. Because I think in some cases we mix up some metadata, but not in this. So yeah, I'm just trying to think about any work that needs to be done on Cinder. But as I think Gurkha pointed out, there seems to be none.
So I'll try and capture this feedback, and when we get to Nova spec for the VDPA stuff, I'll capture the precedent stuff in the Nova spec so that we can document it, etc. So thank you.
Yes, so sorry, Sean. I had to admit that I lost my focus on that discussion. I just understood that nothing is required from the Cinder team, right?
Correct. I was looking for their basic approval of the direction that there was nothing, we're not abusing the Cinder APIs in any way if we were to do this. And the main recommendation is use the volume generic metadata, not the image properties copy that's in the volume to do this override or preference, whatever way we want to phrase it. So I think we're good.
Okay, then I captured that in Etherpad, and you're free to add any other comments. Okay, because I guess we are before the time we thought. If we have some Nova folks here, let's take like a 10 minutes break. I would say I will add that in the PTG bot, so you will see, and I will also add that in the Nova channel. So let's say. Let me calculate that with UTC time at 4:20. Let's go back to the Nova room for discussing topics. 4:20, please. 4:20 UTC Nova room. Bye bye, and see you in like 10 minutes. Bye bye.
Yeah, thanks Nova team for joining.
Thanks for having us.
And thanks Cinder folks, by the way. Loved.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Okay, so from Cinder side, I assume this session to be long enough, but yeah, I think we can end early today because we still have some topics tomorrow, and maybe some topic pops up like today it did to fill up the whole 1 hour gap between Glance cross project. So yeah, we have 2 topics for tomorrow, and we'll see if we get more topics. So, but if someone wants to discuss anything today, they can. All right, I will just switch the Etherpads in the meantime. Okay, I see Gorka is writing the info. My initial plan was just to copy the Nova Etherpad, but yeah, would be great if we.
Yep, sounds good. Sounds good to copy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to write the TLDR that I had in my mind.
Yeah, that's even better. But yeah, just to avoid efforts on your end, I just mentioning that.
Mm-hmm. I don't know who is sharing, but I think it's sharing the Nova Cinder Etherpad, right?
This is the Cinder one.
No, the one I'm seeing on the screen is
It just looks black to me.
Nova's. Sorry?
I just see a black screen being shared. I'm not sure what anybody else sees.
Okay. Well, I'm seeing the Cinder at the top in bold, Horizon at the bottom in bold as well, and that was the Nova one.
I'm seeing the same.
Switch the Etherpad. Okay, I will share
I'm
again.
also seeing the black screen.
Yeah, I'm getting a black screen too.
Then I'm the only one. Okay, yeah, I will check again.
It's the same thing we see with the audio. I think once we get past a certain number of people on BlueJeans, it starts forking into different groups and people get different things.
An active HA problem.
I'm still seeing the NovaPad.
Me as well. It looked like it was going to change, and show the same one.
Now is it?
Yep.
Right. Okay.
Yes, I can see it. Thanks.
Yeah, so I think that happened on my end made both of my BlueJeans on both laptops useless, and I had to reconnect to. Yeah. So I see someone has added that there is a OSTC session about Slurp, and given the timing, I won't be able to attend today, but I would encourage if someone wants to attend that. Apart from that, does anyone have any topics for today?
I will only say that it's fun that they currently line 75, and I see they are currently writing above that line. So it's going to be, I don't know where.
Sorry, Goka,
I don't know what line. Yeah, in the Etherpad, that the new line you mentioned that they added for the slurp, or whatever, that says currently line 75. I went there and I see somebody's writing new lines in line 67, which means that 75 will probably be somewhere else.
Yeah, it's a bad
Yep,
idea mentioning line number in Etherpad. I have
109. Yep.
it might change again, but uh,
Sounds like Brian will be attending, so at least we will be able to ask tomorrow what happened in that meeting.
yeah, let's just add a topic for tomorrow, Brian, to give us a summary of what happened there. Yeah, I'm sure Van won't be ready for that, but okay, I guess then we are pretty much done for the day. I will just stop the recording.